I am getting sick of all of this. I'm leaving this in. It is taking me forever to figure out how to do this, guys. What's up? How are you doing? So, I promised you a video, and I've been thinking about how to make studying this easier. I don't want to give up on it, but I can only imagine trying to learn philosophy, even at this level, on your own, at home. Some of the smartest of you, maybe far smarter than I am, could do it. I got a doctorate, and learning this on my own was a pain. So I'm trying to change that and kind of mix it up, but I wanted to make you a video. I wanted it to be kind of goofy and entertaining, and if you know anything about doing this stuff, if you're using a green screen, to make the green screen go away. So in the first video I made, not that it was any big deal, but I was, the picture was in my background, I was just kind of there. Well, rule number one is don't wear a green shirt. So when I wear a green shirt, then I disappear. So I'm going to show you, because it took way too long to figure out how to do all that I'm wanting to do, but I'm going to turn on chroma filtering, which is what happens. You chroma key this image, which means it's going to look for a specific color and then get rid of it. And so I'm gonna add it now, and you'll see what my problem is. So I'm just a head. I'm just a floating head now. So that's perfect. No big deal. I mean, I did waste a little time thinking, if this is what I was going to look like, then this is my only shot at something like this, right? I could spend the whole time talking to you like this. I mean, if I just move my head around, I'm almost in the perfect spot. I'm going coronavirus insane, I think, but I don't want you guys to think that I'm not thinking about you every day, and honestly hoping that we're able to learn something, even in what is the middle of a really odd experience. So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little. If you've been reading, God bless you. I mean, you guys are giving it your best effort, and you're being asked to study in a way that nobody your age is normally asked to study in a school setting. Now, homeschool kids, I don't know, maybe you do it a lot, but a floating head, right? So I'm going to make myself not a floating it just looks so dumb. I'm going to make myself not a floating head, so that's not distracting. So it'll just be me and a green screen. But anyway, okay, so in your textbook, right, you're supposed to be reading about philosophy. And so I just want to set a couple of ground rules, and then I'm going to shift gears away from the text and kind of show you some of the stuff that I actually personally created when I was doing my doctorate. Okay, so what you see right now is a small part of me doing my final project and dissertation, and so I created this information as one of the foundational elements that I believe are essential to formulating a Christian worldview. But to do that, we've got to know the subject, and this subject specifically is about, you can see it, the doctrine of God, knowing God, which we would call theology, maybe. But a part of that has to do with philosophy. And so in your textbook on page 200, it talked about philosophy. Now I'm going to disagree. He makes reference to a statement he says in chapter 1. It's not any big deal, but I'm just disagreeing. He says that philosophy means a friend of wisdom. So he says that philo means friend. It means affection, almost. It's one of the words for love in Greek. So Philadelphia, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So it's love of wisdom, more literally, friend of wisdom. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. When I saw that, I'm like, that's not correct. Exactly. It's not a big deal, but it's not correct. So I just want to shout that out. But what this actually deals with, philosophy, is how do you know that you know something, right? It talks about metaphysics. So how do you know things that are beyond your reality? What is beyond my reality? Epistemology is in here. That's the nature of knowledge. What is knowledge? What is knowing? There's a lot of really interesting stuff in just the beginning part of this chapter that I asked you to read. Materialism, everything is made of stuff. All that. Now, I had a philosophy 101 teacher who said that history, antiquity, says that metaphysics is called metaphysics. So, book tells you that means beyond physical, right? So what's past reality. But that my philosophy professor taught us that I don't know, I've never actually looked this up, that metaphysics, it literally means after or past physics. And so he said that as the sciences were being established, that the person putting the stuff in order got to physics and then got to this subject. So you imagine like looking at this book and thinking, well, this is sort of about that, but it's not, and I don't know what to call it, so I'm just going to call it after physics, and then puts it on the shelf. So metaphysics, after physics. That's probably not true. But when I was a freshman in college, that was hilarious to me. So anyway, let's me give you a little something to chew on. If you don't like this stuff, I wish there was a way to make you like it. I love the idea of knowing. How do you know what you know? Rene Descartes, if you've heard that name before, and I've mentioned him before in class. You remember that when we had class? Rene Descartes really popularized this idea of how do you know that you know, and he came up with an idea that was older than him, but he began to popularize it, and it came up more and more, the idea of the dreamer. So if you're asleep, how do you know that you're dreaming? And the answer was, most people said, well, because you wake up. That's how you know. You know that you were dreaming because you wake up and you realize that you're not dreaming. You know, have you ever had a dream, they would posit, that was so real that in the moment you thought it was real? You know, I mean, if you've ever been afraid in a dream, you wake up, you know, you shake or you're afraid. So things in dream reality seem very real at the time, and the only real way that you know you're not dreaming is because you wake up. And Rene Descartes said, what if we're going to wake up now? What if this is a dream and I'm going to wake up soon? There is a different type of waking up. And you might see how religiously that could be bent and used to say, well, that's true because you're going to wake up in eternity, and so there's a different waking up. But that begins to stretch the understanding of the physical world and God's creation, and so nothing ever works perfectly like that. But I always thought that was really interesting. Like, how do you know that you know? And when I, we've already used this example, but when I say chair, you think of something. But we don't all think of the same chair. So is the chair, or is our perception of it what makes it? And immediately I know that some of you are like, and maybe you've clicked off. You know, don't forget like, comment, and subscribe. But anyway, I love that stuff. Well, what does that mean for you and for me, and when we're thinking about God and His existence? And while this PowerPoint isn't 100% tailored toward that, it is very much focused at that. And so I actually just want to work through it with you. Okay. And so the very first thing that we have to do is define what we're talking about when we talk about God and the knowing of Him. So I asked you in one of your recent journals about, you know, God says, be still and know that I am God. And I didn't say this, but a lot of people would say that the Hebrew there actually means to trust that He is God, to be reassured that He is God, not you or me. But I asked, if He says to be still and know, what do you know? And that's a philosophy question. What do you know about God? And so what we know about God is couched right at the top there, at the doctrine of God. Can you see this? I don't know. If you can see my arrow, I'm going to use my mouse as though you can see it, and if you can't, I'm going to look like a giant fool, and it's going to live forever on the internet. But the very first bullet point, the doctrine of God, which is called theology. Some texts will call it theology proper, because all topics, Christology, soteriology, eschatology, all those things, they are parts of theology. But theology proper, the idea of the knowledge of God, what do you know and how can you know about God? And so there is two parts of knowing God. Your book has talked about them. We deal with them at the end of each chapter, however much of that is sunk in. So number one, the knowledge of God comes from His universal revelation, and then the second part is His particular or special revelation. Universal revelation being creation, the order of existence, all of those things pointing to a creator, and the things that we can bear witness to about God from what we see around us and in us ourselves. We are an orderly thing, and we have an understanding of morality, so we know that God is more, all those things. And then the particular revelation or special revelation would be the Bible, or God's testimony directly to His creation through prophets, through Christ, through all of that stuff. And so you and I know that as Christians, but it's particular because it was given to a specific people during a specific time in a specific place. It's very particular, that revelation. And then when we talk about knowing God, we have to be able to describe or identify what God is like. And so the next things under there, where it says the greatness of God, the goodness of God, and so on, those are actually from a theology textbook written by a man named Millard Erickson, who is a modern American theologian, theologist. Okay, yeah, I've had enough of the corona, and I'm losing my mind. But okay, so an American theologian, Millard Erickson. Some of you got pastor parents or pastor friend. You may have heard of him, or Wayne Grudem. These are modern guys. Not all of them by any stretch, but two of the more popular ones, especially writing what's called a systematic theology, which is having a, it doesn't matter. Okay, so what God is like, what God does, this is taken from Erickson's Christian theology. So what is God like? Well, he reveals to us his greatness, his goodness, his nearness to us, and his distance from us. He is holy, that means totally separate, and yet he dwells within all of those who have surrendered to him. His three-in-oneness, the Trinity, what he's doing, what is his plan, what is his originating work, that's creation. What is his continuing work, that is his providential provision in the now and in the time to come. And then how evil is involved in God's work. Note there it says a special problem, because that is, of all of the things about worldview, about Christianity, or any belief at all really, evil, bad things happening, and I use word, maybe I should say bad things happening, poses a philosophy, a problem, because it's how do you explain that away? Again, if God is all good, how can there be evil and stuff like that? So the doctrine of God is the knowledge of God, right? It's what we know about God. And this doesn't matter. This is part of my personal philosophy. What is essential about theology proper? That an absolute God absolutely exists, and so on and so forth. You can pause this and read that if you've got questions. I probably don't stress this enough, guys. You can email me, you can text me. Take a look and see what you think. But anyway, the next couple of slides are actually going to have to do with philosophy. I'm trying to pay attention to the time. So why can I believe in God? Why do I believe? Well, first off, general revelation and then special revelation. We've talked about that before in class. And so the summary statement on this slide is probably the most important one, which is that the Bible itself, the whole thing, is a complete testimony of God. From start to finish, it tells me what I need to know about the Lord. Is there more to know? Absolutely. 100% absolutely there is more to know about God. There are questions that you have about God. There are questions that I have about God that we do not know the answer to. Some of them are fun to ponder. One of my favorites, when I learned about what it was, John Calvin got very interested in what we call infralapsarianism or supralapsarianism. What is the order of salvation in the order of creation? Did God decide to redeem before the fall, or did God decide to redeem after the fall? Was that before even creation began, or is it how can we know this? Now, can we use logic in this limited skull and come up with things that we think make sense? Yeah, we can. But can we know that? Not by the definition of knowing that most philosophers abide by. And we're definitely not going to get into that process, because trust me, there's a couple of books I can see from here, and trust me, we don't have time, and we don't want to kind of go through that. You probably don't. If I'm wrong, let me know. I will hunt this rabbit as far as you want to hunt. But anyway, the Bible gives me this full testimony, but how do I know what I know about God? Okay, so here are 4 philosophical arguments for the existence of God. Now, me showing you these and you reading them even right now while I'm talking to you, this does not make you a philosophy expert. This does not make you some great grand debater, okay? But I want you to see that there are schools of philosophy. There are schools of the source of knowing that point to God's existence when we use those schools. Does this mean that if you can use one of those schools to prove God doesn't exist, that he doesn't? No. Just as none of these are ironclad, boop, there, the argument is over, God is real, they don't defeat God either. But again, we're using man's limited knowledge to try to, identify how we know what we know. So we're looking at the physical world. None of these are well, sort of metaphysical and physical based, but let's just look at them. Shut up, Mason. Okay. Teleology. Teleological arguments are philosophical arguments. Now that's a big word. All of these will be teleological. Okay, that's an argument from order. Okay, so because things have an order, a certain argument is made. And so you see here, the teleological argument for God's existence is the absolute oldest philosophical argument for God to exist. This is called the argument from design. Okay, so when I look around, not at what man has built, but when I look around at creation itself, so planets, stars, gravity, order, existence as a whole, that begs the existence of a designer, someone who designed what I see, because it is too orderly. Thus, teleological arguments from order. It's too much order in all of this. Okay. Here's a quote from a Christian apologist, maybe the most famous one alive right now, named William Lane Craig. He says, "Just as we infer a designer for any product, right? When I look at the phone that I'm holding and the complexity of this phone, I am convinced someone had to build it. It is far too complicated to think, no matter what, that you could have left a bunch of parts and they just put themselves together. So this begs me to confess that someone built this device. Even something simple like a book, it didn't type itself. It didn't bind itself, and it didn't randomly choose a harder surface on the outside than the inside. This begs to confess that someone designed this book. Well, the more so, Craig is saying, God is identified in the order and the existence of creation." Let me finish the quote. "Just as we infer a designer for any product, we must infer an intelligent designer for the universe." Now, I'm going to swing outside of my weight class for a second and point out that it's one of the laws of thermodynamics, like the second law of something anyway about heat and conservation and blah, 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 and a super fast summary of one of these laws, and I probably should be able to tell you which one it is. But one of them is that order leads to chaos, right? The idea. So if you take a canister of oxygen, inside that confined area of the canister, the oxygen molecules form an order. They order themselves. There's an order because of the compactness that they're in. Okay. When I release the valve and the oxygen spreads out, they don't just come out of the canister in their orderly form. They spread out all over the place and become chaotic. They're everywhere, right? A simplified way of talking about this order to chaos is your room. Some of you, at the time of me recording this, have already done your Bible journal for the week, and some of you are talking about. And if it's you that I'm talking about, see, I'm not using your name, so nobody knows that it's you. So the one of you who wrote, "I do not miss school," I mean like a knife through my heart, okay? I mean all caps, "I do not miss school." Sheesh, some things you can keep to yourself, but somebody else wrote that they have more housework now, because you're home, constantly. It's constantly something to do, right? Okay, so let's say tomorrow, you clean your room, top to bottom, spick and span. You can like rub your finger across the floor and it goes, eep. It's so clean. I mean, it's boo, 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 clean. Now you never clean it again for a year. Is it going to stay clean, or is it going to progressively get more chaotic, dirty, right? On the flip of that, if you take a chaotic room with dirt and dust and stuff everywhere, and you just shut the door and wait 100 years, when you open the door, will it have cleaned itself? No. In fact, chaos either remains or comes from order. So then, the idea that the Big Bang was an explosion of chaos that all coalesced into order argues against scientific and physics laws like thermodynamics and this rule of conservation of energy and whatever else. I should know more about that. I don't. Luckily, you're watching this on the internet. You can Google and try to get your thermodynamic education. Get it on. Go do it. Teach me something. But order doesn't come from chaos. The vice versa is true. Chaos comes from order, which speaks to this idea that if order exists, it has to have been designed And we can see that that order is progressively chaotic as we almost devolve in our morality and the things that we begin to walk towards or walk away from. So the teleological argument says that because this is in order, now that's creation, then there has to have been someone who put it in order. Because left on its own, all of existence just proceeds to be more chaotic. Okay? So I'm going to actually stop here, on a cliffhanger, but it's 20 minutes, and I made myself a promise on your behalf that I wouldn't keep you for more than 20 minutes. We'll go through cosmological arguments, ontological, and then the ethical argument, and then look, it moves on to something else, so we'll be done, okay? I want you to have read the book, I really do. Is it a perfect book? I told you in the beginning of the year, no. But it's always easier to learn when I have some sort of foundation, and so, but if you don't read the book, I understand, I do. I'm still giving you the grade you tell me of what you've done. But anyway, for this week, you don't have school on Friday, so I hope you've watched this. Get your assessment grade and your journal as you send those in by tomorrow. I miss you guys. I didn't figure this would last as long as it did, and being a teacher, as poor as that might seem, and a pastor, and a homeschool parent, and a husband, and a citizen of the world, well, this is very, very strange, but we're going to make it through, and if I haven't told you, I'm super proud of you guys. Those of you who are doing what you got to do and stepping up, I think it speaks well of your generation, and I'm proud of you. So anyway, I hope this is interesting. If you got to rewatch it, great. If you don't got to rewatch it, fine. I am tired of trying to figure it out, and I will try to remember not to wear a green shirt next time. So see you guys later. Have a good one. Happy Easter, by the way.